Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Well, after the detrimental impact which hard work had on his financial stability and his relationships, my final guest, Shawn Shewchuk from Change Your Results, realised that hard work does not automatically equate to success. Rather, Shawn discovered that more success can be achieved in less time than we have been conditioned to believe. Shawn, you are known as the productivity speaker and a results specialist, so I'm sure our listeners would be interested to hear about the career path that you followed.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. When I was 13 years old, I was reading a magazine. There was an ad. It was something to the effect of help businesses grow. And I asked my parents in those days to write a check, and they did. And I actually still have the book all these years later. And it really was a watered down version of management consulting. It gave me that, I don't know, that thirst for wanting to work with individuals, leaders, entrepreneurs, and help them grow. And so, we're now, we're 28 or 29 years in and well over 12,000 clients that I've had the privilege to work with from pretty much all over the world.
I know that your mantra in life is that you give all you can and then give a little more. Provide us with some examples of how you apply this to your own life and how entrepreneurs can implement this mindset in their own businesses.
Well, they say that, do the extra mile. We all heard this. It's a lonely place. So I am very much of the opinion that most people just do the bare minimum to get by. If you're going to be truly successful, if you're going to have an impact, a positive impact, if you're going to build and leave a legacy, then at the end of the day, what really needs to happen is you need to take and do more. If you're supposed to do, steps 1, 2, and 3, always do steps 4, maybe even step 5, because what's going to happen is, let's say you have a really great career, a great job. Let me be very clear about something. Everyone notices when someone goes that extra mile, when they take the extra step, when they add or contribute at a whole new level. And, I've worked with a lot of people. I remember working with a brilliant woman out of the United States a number of years ago. And she said her boss hated her, her coworkers and colleagues hated her. And the reality was no one hated her. What happened was she started to she was looking at herself, and there was an issue there. And once she changed, the late great Dr. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When she changed her perspective on where she worked and her boss and coworkers and colleagues, and you know what, things changed. And within about a 24-month period, she became vice president of entire division within the company. When we change that perception, that perspective, our outcomes change.
And Shawn, while support is great and can be of assistance along that journey, ultimately all those journeys are taken alone.
Yes, you're not wrong. And let's be very clear about something. When you make a decision that you're going to level up, you're going to do something different than the status quo, the norm, you are going to have detractors. And this is an important point. And unfortunately, most of those detractors are the people closest to you. Now, if you think about this for a moment, and you say, well, why would somebody who's close to me not want me to succeed at a high level? Here's one more question. How does that individual look, that person who's close to you, if you become more successful than them? So I'm not saying you should ever eliminate anyone from your life. There are people maybe you should, but that's not my place to say. But you're going to find as you grow and you have that impact, there are people you spend much less time with because they're not aligned with your values and your direction. And when you have that misalignment, there becomes a little bit of a gap, and that's okay because you're focused on doing something much greater, much more impactful than about 98 or 99% of the world.
I question at times people's ability to make good decisions. So what advice have you got for them this morning in relation to that?
Well, this is a really interesting question, and I've been asked this question many, many times, and I'm going to share something that I think is interesting. We all know what we should do, but the largest gap in our lives is between what we know and what we do. And if you question that, if you have children, think about this. If you have young children or had young children, and they went and did something that they knew they weren't supposed to do, they've been told before they shouldn't have done it, and you look at that child and say, why did you do that? The kid will go, I don't know. You say, did you know you shouldn't have done that? And they say, yeah. Okay. We take this all the way into adulthood. And if you want a really harsh example, this is not meant to knock anyone, but if you see someone smoking a cigarette and they go, I got to break this habit, just as a side note, to be clear, you can't break any habit, you have to replace it. But they know that they're hurting themselves by smoking cigarettes, and yet they still do it. Why is that? And that's only one example of many, many, many examples. So yes, we know what we should be doing. Inherently, most of us grew up with a version of what was right and what was wrong. And at the end of the day, Bob Proctor said something to me. He was my first coach many, many years ago. He wrote the foreword to my first book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Results. And I remember him very distinctly saying something to me, Shawn. He said, jump off the building and grow wings on the way down. Now, obviously, he didn't mean that literally, but that's the point of this. Do something that scares you. Do something that you're not used to doing. Do something that's going to change the outcome. And we all know there's a risk. You have to be willing to embrace the risk in order to reap the result.
Shawn, as I mentioned in the introduction, you were known as the productivity speaker. In general, how would you assess business people's productivity levels, and what traps do they typically fall into?
So here's an interesting statistic. Approximately, this is Western world, so wherever you happen to be in the what we consider a democracy, the average person is productive 4 out of 24 hours. So just think about that for just a moment, and I'll answer your question. So entrepreneurs typically get caught up in what's called entrepreneur syndrome. And that is that if I don't touch it all, every piece of paper, every telephone call, every email, every inquiry, whatever it happens to be, if I don't do it all myself, it's not done right. And so because of that, we stunt the growth of our initiative, of our companies. The toughest thing I ever had to do is when I was growing a very large company was I had to let go. And I hired a CEO when we hit about $9 million a year in that company. And I was in there the following morning at 6 a.m. And I was hanging my coat up, and he came out to me and said, hey, Shawn, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm here to work. It's my company. He goes, I understand that. And of course it's your company. He says, but stay out of my way. Remember, you hired me to do a job. That was one of the toughest things someone had ever said to me. But he was right. So listen, this goes back to what we talked about a moment ago. Know what you shouldn't be doing and don't do it.
What does the 3-step method for boosting productivity comprise of?
So this is a really interesting one. Download, delegate, and automate. So we live in a world today where entrepreneur syndrome, if you start a business, and Michael E. Gerber says this good in the book, E-Myth. He said, just because you can go and incorporate a company in your jurisdiction and you're a good consultant, you're a good plumber, you're a good graphic designer, whatever you are, just because you can do those things doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. Most people who do this are technicians suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure. So you need to understand, you need to download. Maybe you're bookkeeping. You don't have to hire a bookkeeper full time. Have someone that works for you for 2 hours a week to do data entry on the bookkeeping side of things. That's not going to cost you a lot of money. Probably you're way more valuable doing what it is you're good at. Automation. We live in a world today where software automates a ton of things for us that we don't have to be doing. Get educated on what it is you need. Get a coach for starters. And then the other side of this is we talked about downloading, we talked about automating, and we talked about delegating. One of the first things we talk to people about is if you're in a place where you've been operating for a while, go get yourself an assistant, somebody that can handle the problems, the fires, the phone calls, your calendar, all of these little tasks that definitely, and entrepreneurs tell me, Shawn, but it needs to get done, and they're right. They need to get done, but you don't need to be doing it.
Talk to us about the concept of strategic accountability and how it can deliver meaningful change in business.
Yeah, this is a really good question. And a lot of times when this term is raised, one of the challenges that I think is apparent, I think, to most is we run around, entrepreneurs I'm speaking of, we run around like a chicken with our head cut off. And typically what happens, it's human nature where we only do those things we relish, those things we enjoy doing. The things we don't enjoy doing tend to get pushed to the back of the desk, to the front of the truck, something we don't want to do it. And what happens is a direct result of the sort of the human element is all of a sudden those things that we have ignored or intentionally pushed aside tend to cause us problems, and they become fires. And so our world then is consumed with putting out fires. And if all we're doing, or a majority of our time, is dedicated to putting out fires because we didn't address whatever it was at the outset, we can't grow our business because our time is directed at the wrong things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, in your book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Results, you refer to our minds being powerful tools that create any reality that we envision. So what strategies do we need to implement such a reality?
There's a theme in today's conversation with you. It really comes down to that decision that every single one of you are going to make. And the decision is, what is it that I really and truly want? Because if you don't know what you want, you're never going to get there. And there's three steps again. It's funny how 3 steps keeps coming up. There's the clarity, so know where you're going. Focus to the exclusion of all outside distractions, and then execution, the 3rd step.
Lots of people listening this morning, especially business people, will feel that their time impoverished. So time management, of course, is a fundamental aspect of achieving the success that you talk about. Most business people are using to-do lists based on ranking tasks by urgency and importance, and also using checklists. But from your experience, Shawn, what tools have been most effective for you when it comes to time management?
I know for the last 2, 3, or whatever it is, generations, we've been told we have to manage time, but you cannot manage time. You get all there is. The clock doesn't stop, but you can manage the activities and the time that you're gifted or blessed with. So at the end of the day, it's not about time management, because at the end of the day, everyone gets the same amount of time. I get 24 hours a day, and so do you. So the reality is what are we doing with our time? And I think that's the important thing. Are the things that you're doing with your time, are they high leverage? Are they moving the needle? Are they moving you in the direction of your goal or objective? Productivity is defined in this way: any action step or activity that moves you in the direction of your goal or objective. So if you're doing anything that doesn't fall into that category, in other words, it's non-productive, please stop doing it.
Shawn, finally this morning, what motivates you, and who are the people in business that have inspired you over the years?
That's a really good question. I've been very blessed with a lot of great coaches. I always have a coach, and sometimes more. Currently, I have 2 coaches. I invest an incredible amount of time, energy, effort, and money into becoming better. Our clients work with us because we continually improve. Everything we do is about improving on our end so we can deliver more. I'll say this to you: when you want to make a shift and a change in your life, make that decision and embrace advice. So Bob Proctor, who some of you know, I'm sure, maybe a good portion of you know from the movie The Secret and even prior, was a part of my life for until he passed away last year, right from 28 or 29 years ago. He wrote the foreword to my first book. Some of the business leaders in North America that I'm sure some of you know from watching television shows, Dr. Nita Kubain, president of High Point University in North Carolina, United States. The list honestly goes on, and actually, goes right back to my dad, who was an entrepreneur, and I vowed when I finished high school I would never become an entrepreneur. And then I moved to the big city, got a job, and found out how unemployable I truly was. Not because I didn't qualify, but because I didn't want to work for someone else.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Shawn Shewchuk from Change Your Results, and we hope that Shawn's insights prove beneficial in your life.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast.